Welcome back to the workshop, everybody. Today we're going to be working on the bug again. So we've got the head off at the minute. We've been doing a lot of cleaning. In the last video we repaired that stripped out spark plug hole. We also got our new pistons and barrels, the 1600 ones, which are going to be going into the engine. So today is just a case of getting the head put back together, get the valves in there, make sure the seats are nice and polished, make sure it's all basically good to go, get the new gaskets in there. I've got a gasket set. That's pretty much it. Throw the head back together, throw the barrels and the pistons on the engine, throw the head on the engine, and then we're done on one side and we can start worrying about the other side. Pro tip, stuff these holes full of rags so that you don't have to strip the engine down when you inevitably drop something down here. One thing that is also quite important with these engines is the deck height, so that is the distance between the top of the piston and the outer edge of the barrel, the top of the barrel. Because obviously the further up the barrel it comes, the more it compresses the air in the head, the higher the compression ratio, and you don't really want to go above a certain level with these engines. 1mm deck height is the absolute minimum, and ideally you want between that and 1.48 roughly, or 1.5 mil. So currently we have about 0.76mm, which is not enough. So what I've got here is these shims that came out of the old engine, and these shims are about 0.93mm thick. So 0.92. So with that on here, really this is the wrong tool for the job. You shouldn't really be using a vernier, it should be a depth mic, but I don't have one of those. So with that shim on there, that will give us roughly about 1.56, which is quite low. It's lower than I'd like, but I don't have any of the shims, so that will have to do. So we've got the head on now, we've got that all torqued down, we've got the paper gaskets in the bottom for now. I'm going to see how I get on with them. I know some people just use RTV to seal the bottom there. I'm going to see how the paper gaskets hold up, and worst case scenario, I'll change it. The only thing left to do is to basically put the rocker cover back on, and that is not going on just yet because I've started prepping that to paint it. So I'm waiting for it to be light outside, which is going to be not too long because it's actually quite late. The other thing we'll be doing is obviously putting on the other half of the 1600 pistons and barrels, because at the minute this is a 1550, I guess. It's got two 1600 barrels and it's got two 1500 barrels, which is a bit strange. I wonder what happened if you fired the engine up like that. I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but I'm not going to be the first because it'll probably break something. So you can see a bit better now what we're working with. It's snapped off pretty much completely in there, and it looks like there's also a nut on the other side. So I'm not sure how usable this thread is going to be. But yeah, we're basically just going to try and flatten this off, get a center punch in there and try a reverse drill bit, see if that will bring it out. If not, we can drill bigger and just try and pick the threads out. So finally, after a couple of hours, we managed to get the stud out of this hole. It was an absolute pain in the arse, and this is what came out. And as you can see, there's a bit of drill bit in there because I did actually snap off a drill bit inside it, which just added to the fun. This is a stud. This is what they should look like, and yeah, as you can see, it's completely the wrong size. So what I think we're going to try and do is make one of these on the metal lathe and basically make it so it's a normal size up until here, and then this thread will be a larger size, and then we'll just tap this hole out to be slightly bigger. Right, so that is our finished product. We've got the stud here compared to one of the original studs, and now all that's left to do is to tap out this hole in here and put it in with a bit of Loctite. Right, so now that the engine is all back together, the next thing I want to get on with is painting this. So this is the intake manifold. So this goes to both sides of the engine, and then the carburetor sits on top there. So I'm going to clean this up. Got the wire wheel on the angle grinder here. Clean all this up, and I'm going to mask off around this aluminium, I think, as long as it cleans up nicely, and paint the rest of this with that black, the same as I did the rocker covers. So I actually ended up getting both the intake manifold and the fan cover here completely cleaned up and painted. Didn't take too long. I didn't film much of it because it's really boring, just lots of cleaning, wire brushing with the angle grinder, and it's now all painted. I've also run out of spray paint, so I couldn't carry on. And I've also just started cleaning up the engine covers here. They've got some, they were really rusty, so I've put some aqua steel, some rust converter on there. So that will take care of all that rust and also make it a good surface for us to paint. So once I've got some more paint in, we can paint these guys up and slap them on the engine. The engine I've also just started hitting with the wire wheel. I'm trying to clean this up a little bit. So I've made a little bit more progress. I've taken off the old blanking plate, and we've made this nice new aluminium one that's just a bit tidier, that we're just going to bolt down. And I've polished that up, as you can see. I've also polished up the filler cap and the dipstick tube. I got a bit carried away. But we come across a problem straight away. So this is the oil pump cover plate, and these two top bolts are okay, I believe. This bottom one is stripped, and this bottom one is stripped as well. So this one didn't actually have a stud in it. This is supposed to be an M6x1 stud, and I think it had like a 5/16 bolt in it that somebody had obviously just jammed in there because it's stripped out. This one just turns in its hole and doesn't tighten up. These two I've managed to get reasonably tight, not up to the torque spec, and I don't think I'm going to go anywhere close to that. I'm just going to nip them up and just see if I get an oil leak, basically. And if I do, I can pull the crank pulley off fairly easily and fix this without taking the engine out of the car, because it's a Baja, so the whole back half is like cut off. I'm probably just going to make some repair studs for these as well, like I did with this one. So we'll just make some oversized ones, tap the hole out a little bit bigger, both of these bottom ones, and hopefully that'll solve our issues. After a bit of further inspection, it turns out this thread is actually fine. It just turns out the nut, the inside thread that was in the nut, had stripped out. I'm not entirely sure why, but I found another M6 nut, stuck that on there, and it tightens up lovely, so that's fine. These two threads are fine, as we know. So it's just this one I need to worry about. And I've been looking for a M7 bolt in our various tubs of miscellaneous bolts and stuff, and can't find anything that's M7. We've only got like M6 or M8, which is quite annoying. But what I'm going to do is this shank of this bolt is 8mm, so I'm just going to turn one side down to 7mm, the other side down to 6mm, and chop the head off. And I'll leave this on here and just put some flats in there so I can hold it in a vise, and then I'll just use some dies. I've got M7 and M8 dies, and M6, sorry, and I'll just cut cut a thread on one side and then cut a thread on the 6mm side, and then that'll screw into the engine and then leave the 6mm sticking out.
So if you're wondering what I'm doing just here, it's a little engineer's trick that my dad taught me. So basically I'm using the chuck of this to keep this straight so that when the thread starts cutting it's perfectly in line. It's not going to be going wonky or a funky angle, which is often difficult when you're trying to use a die on a bit of bar stock. It's quite difficult to get it started right. So this just makes it all really easy, and whilst it's in the lathe I thought might as well do it. You just got to make sure that the lathe here is in a really low gear so that the chuck basically won't turn, and then you can turn this with no issues.
Right, so that is our hole tapped out. Got the stud here, so I'm just going to put a bit of Loctite on there. I've got it cut down to 23mm. I've left this end a bit long so I can do it with a pair of mole grips, and I'll just stick a bit of Loctite on that, stick it in there, and then we can put the cover on, the gasket and the cover on. Unfortunately nothing's ever easy, so this thread on this stud is also dead, so I need to try and get that stud out and put a new one in. So that's now both of these that have needed replacing. So that came out surprisingly easily with a pair of mole grips, and as luck would have it, sat on top here was a bit of M6 threaded rod, so chop that to size, and yet another little bit of Loctite, shove that in the hole, and finally that should be everything. But that is all that we've got time for today's video, unfortunately. For me, it's actually taken probably about two and a half weeks to get you guys all this footage. It's been a lot of evenings and after work and stuff like that. So in the next video, we will be looking at getting the engine all back together, getting the exhaust pipe modified, cleaning up the engine bay, and hopefully slapping that engine back in the Beetle. And then it's just a case of a couple more bits and bobs and it'll be fully drivable. So thanks for sticking with me, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.